one and all. We, the students of the Vinod Gupta School of Management, IIT Kharagpur, are extremely privileged to host Mr. Abhirup Ganguly, Managing Director, Impact Analytics, for a session on productizing AI ML for enterprises, achieving human AI collaboration as a part of our online leadership talk series, Vaakya. A seasoned professional, Mr. Ganguly has rich expertise in formulating business strategy, management consulting, and financial modeling. An alumnus of IIM Bangalore, Mr. Ganguly was a part of BCG before beginning to lead impact analytics in India, which serves various business verticals across a wide array of sectors through a blend of business consulting, data science, and technology. It's an honor to host you today, sir. And without any further delay, I would like to request our esteemed guest to kindly address the participants. Over to you, sir.
Got it. Cool. So thanks a lot, everyone, for inviting me to this webinar. And I'm very excited to talk to all of you regarding a topic which is very close to my heart, something that we do day in and day out. Productizing AI and ML for enterprises, achieving human AI collaboration. So, of course, AI is a topic which is much talked about these days, and then probably many of you are pretty know it pretty well and are excited about it. What I'm going to talk about today is a topic which is slightly different, which is not regarding the technical aspect of AI, but a business aspect about how it is made real for businesses and through enterprise software. And again, this enterprise software is a field which is not talked about a lot in the public domain because there's not a lot of advertising and all that goes with enterprise software. But these are incredibly powerful and these are what help businesses run. And I believe India is at a point where these enterprise softwares are a huge opportunity for us. So very excited to talk about this topic. I'll introduce myself. I'm a chemical engineer from Jadavpur University, and post that I did my uh, I MBA from IIM Bangalore. After that, I was a strategy consultant at the Boston Consulting Group for 4 years. And then I became a part of the starting team of Impact Analytics and have been with Impact Analytics for more than 5 years now. And Impact Analytics is a startup, and we are fortunate to be recognized as a pioneer in the world of enterprise AI products. There are some recognitions by the Inc. 500, the Deloitte Fast 500, the Forbes, and the FT, which we have been fortunate to be recognized in. And we have been in building enterprise AI products for retail and consumer industries, mostly from my experience in this field. Now, to introduce the topic, I'll just go through uh, some of the uh, some of the key themes which we are talking about. So, number one is, of course, artificial intelligence. And what is artificial intelligence? It is software doing cognitive tasks like decision making, understanding images, languages, etc. Artificial intelligence is, of course, something which is very exciting nowadays, and probably all of you know about it. But just wanted to sort of quickly capture what is the essence of it. And when we say cognitive tasks, these are tasks which we typically expect humans to do, like decision making using rationalization, using knowledge, using reasoning, um, understanding images and understanding visual inputs, and being able to process meaning out of natural language. But in various cases, artificial intelligence software can now do it, right? And that's a very powerful technology. Um, Now, what is and one more thing about artificial intelligence is that in a technical sense, there are different kinds of artificial intelligence. But nowadays, when we talk about artificial intelligence, we are mostly talking about something that is called machine learning, which is um, a, a type of artificial intelligence where uh, the software is able to take some data as input or an image or some natural language as input and produce an output, which could either be a decision, a prediction, recognizing objects out of from those images and things like that. And the some and the thing about ML is that this software is built upon data which has been provided to the software, and it kind of automatically create some mathematical structures which can process patterns and can do this, right? So, and will not go too much into the technical aspects of it, but this is broadly what one can understand ML as. And when we talk about enterprise AI software applications, what we are talking about, that we are talking about software which helps business employees do their jobs better and faster using AI and ML. And the role of AI and ML in business software is for AI and ML to recommend better decisions faster. Now, there are a couple of things to talk about here, right? So, one is that enterprise AI or B2B or business to business software. So these are not the softwares which you use in your daily life, right? Because those softwares are called B2C software, right? Your social media software, your applications, your apps, mobile apps, and all of that. Even all the productivity software like your Excel and all of that. So that is all B2C. Um, B2B are software which you would have used. Many of you might have come with some prior experience. So you might have used some software which while you were working. Let's take the example of maybe used something to apply for leaves, or you applied or to check your payroll and things like that, or maybe for doing digital marketing or reaching out to customers and things like that. So those are enterprise softwares. Now, there have been enterprise softwares for a long time. Enterprise software, as I was telling you, is incredibly powerful. Companies who have been building enterprise software, there are large and very well-known companies like SAP, like Oracle, like Salesforce, and them. What is happening with AI is that uh, now with the growth in the AI technology, uh, AI is powering some of the enterprise software. So some of the old enterprise software is including AI in it, and then there are new kinds of software which are being built which use AI or an ML behind them or power them through AI and ML. And again, their role is to use AI and ML to help business users make better decisions in their day to day work. And this is somewhat nascent and very rapidly growing field. And as I was mentioning, that I believe that in India, we are at a stage where this could be a huge opportunity in the coming days. Because India has been known as a provider of software and IT services to the entire world. And now we are seeing a stage where there are many software which is being developed, software products which are being developed in India. Like there are some recent unicorns who have been who are in this field. Uh, uh, like talk of iCertis, Dhruva, you might have heard this name, Zoho, Freshdesk, etc. So these are all enterprise software, right? And these are these are growing, and in India there's a lot of other people who are building enterprise software products, and certainly many of those will be AI ML driven products. There are products which companies like us are developing out of India, which are AI ML driven software products, and this is definitely going to be a market which is going to grow. And I believe there's a huge opportunity going forward in this field. Now, so as as students in business management, what does this mean to you, right? So one thing is that you might be product managers, right? Some of you might have worked in software before coming to do your MBA. So you might have some experience about software from the technical side, but post MBA, you most likely might be taking up product management roles, or some role in sales and business development of software. And therefore, understanding the role of this AI ML driven enterprise software can be interesting to you. You might be users of such software as part of an enterprise, right? And you might be maybe part of a project which is rolling out a new software in your enterprise, and definitely the enterprise which is investing in such software, they are expecting that to be successful, and then we need to know how to make them successful, because it is true that enterprise AI software implementations are not always successful. There are a lot of challenges there, and it might not always be successful. So that's one aspect. Or you might be buyers of some such software, like you might need to evaluate between such software. So um, is where we you might find yourself interacting or being involved in a enterprise AI ML driven software. And what I'm going to talk about are about some good principles such software should have, primarily based on my experience. I am also going to refer to some external examples which are available in public domain. One thing about enterprise software is that not a lot of what we do is typically available in public domain, because the interaction is typically directly between the company and the client. Therefore, I'll refer to some other examples which happen to be there in public domain as well. Before diving deep into the topic, just a little look at what are the typical components of an enterprise software. Those of you who are have been involved in software in any role, either as users or developers, will know this very well. But any software typically has two components, right? One is a user interface and one is an application backend. And an enterprise AI software is no different. It has these two interfaces. Just the thing is that the user interface will can be a mobile application, can be a desktop application, can be a web application. Nowadays, most of these are served through a web interface where there is a remote cloud server from which it is served. And what is important about the user interface in case of enterprise AI software is that this show the decision recommendations in the UI, right? And this is where the users see the decision recommendations. And very important, you need to embed the business workflow. And this is one aspect which we'll talk about a little bit in detail later. And in terms of the application backend, it will be like there are typical software backend functionalities which are there. What is slightly different here is that there will be something like called a AI ML model, which, as we have talked about, is essentially a piece of software which can process data and give a useful output, which is either a decision, a prediction, a recognition, etc. The software is built by studying data, and this model needs to be kept continuously updated. And this is one aspect of enterprise software backend, which is important. Now, this is a little bit of a engineering problem, but there are some implications about product management. So sort of good to understand how it all fits together. Now, the key question is that why do we need human AI collaboration for great outcomes? You might have seen news reports or like a lot of talk nowadays that AI is actually going to replace humans, right? That does not seem to be the case in the near future, right? That's not how things are shaping up, at least in the near future, and in the far future, we'll see. In the near future, what is definitely necessary is for human and AI to collaborate, right? And that human and AI collaboration is necessary for enterprise AI softwares to succeed in the implementation. So, and the reason why this is the case is um, enterprise decision making is complex. Things change continuously. Many stakeholders are involved, and human skills of judgment, planning, connecting the dots, imagination, these are very important important aspects in enterprise decision making still. Business decisions are complex, and AI cannot at this point completely make it. There need to be human judgment, connecting the dots, and such soft applications. Uh, so Therefore, the software is typically not aiming to replace human skills, but it is acting as a superpower enhancing them. And we'll talk into a little more detail about it later, what we mean by this. And really, for enterprise software to be successful, it needs to play this role where it is um, able to uh, able to enhance human skills through what AI and automation does better. And there is a very interesting point of view on the role of AI from angle of economics, which being business students you might appreciate. So this has been elaborated in a book called Prediction Machines, which says that what AI and ML technology and its recent growth in recent times shows and means that the cost of predictions has become lower. And now, if we consider predictions as an economic input into a downstream process, that downstream process is decision making. Now, that means what will happen if the cost of an input goes down, that means that process will become better, will become cheaper, will become more abundant. That's just the way kind of economics works, right? And one more important aspect is that if that input into that process has become cheaper, then the complements of that input factor will become more important, and the supplements of that input factor will become less important. So what are the complements uh, of prediction making? The complements of prediction making are judgment, planning, etc., right? Because you can think about decision making as a combination of taking some prediction and then on that prediction using judgment and all of these human skills to finally lead to the decision. And what is a supplement for AI driven expert predictions and things like that? So the role of those might go down, but the importance of decision making skills and importance of judgment and etc., those skills will become very important. um, So with that, and before coming to that, just to sort of give one concrete example of this paradigm of AI helping human, giving an example. So if we talk, retail decision making, one very important area in which retailers make decisions is regarding their assortment or merchandise, right? Which is essentially deciding what to carry in their stores, right? And in the case of fashion retail, in the case of, let's say, apparel retail, every year there are new styles which are coming to the market, and a retailer needs to decide what styles to carry in their assortment, right? So what AI can do is that AI can actually crunch massive amounts of data. It can crunch, let's say, all fashion sites and blogs and all of that, and it can synthesize kind of like emerging patterns of fashion which are emerging for the next season, right? But at the end of the day, that decision on what are the styles which are going to be most popular in the market has to be done by a human, right? Because there is some amount of connecting the dots and there is some amount of judgment involved. It is very difficult for AI to completely automate it. Here is that AI uses its ability to crunch massive amounts of and generate insights in a very structured manner, and the human in taking the decisions and in connecting the dots and in making sure that if they are carrying a style, then there is a complementary style which is also being carried and things like that, right? So that is one example of where AI and human can collaborate and get to a good outcome. So there are three key themes which can help to achieve human AI collaboration in the context of enterprise AI software. And there are some sub themes under this which we'll talk through examples. But the three key themes are: number one, this there has to be a mechanism to enable humans to succeed and shine in this new paradigm, right? And that is through several mechanisms which I'll talk about. Second one is typical to software compared to other kinds of software is that the AI has to be explainable and there has to be a mechanism for continuously increasing accuracy. So this is something which is specific to AI. This aspect is not so much there in other software, and therefore this is something very important to think about while we are thinking about AI software. The third aspect is that design is as important as in other software products, and there are some specific considerations about design when we talk about AI software products, and we'll talk through some examples regarding that. So now, when we come to the first theme, that the software should enable humans to succeed and shine, there are four key ways in which that can happen. So the first one is that there should be a mechanism which uses human strengths wisely and turn them into superpowers through AI. This is what I was talking about sometimes back, and I'll talk about a few more examples. So yes, humans are great with judgment, connecting dots, and the software needs to harness that. And AI needs to help with insights better and faster, being more granular, right? So there are two examples of from two very disparate fields. There is one company called Skyfer who have a software for detecting fault in steel plates, and this is artificial intelligence computer vision software which can detect fault in steel plates while they are being manufactured, right? And it can hide cases. And what happens is that in this software, the power of the AI algorithm is to be uh, able to look at a massive number of images and identify candidate cases of where the software thinks there is fault, and then pass it on to humans. At the end of the day, the final judgment is with humans, where they are able to make a call as to which of these problems are real problems, and also which of these problems might mean that there is something wrong in a downstream or an upstream process, and that needs to be fixed, right? So that's one example where AI is using its ability to uh, to handle a lot of data and providing insights, and humans are using their judgment. Another example is a example called fast MRI, which is medical imaging solution where the AI can actually use less data than is usual to create MRI images, which means that patients need less exposure, and it uh, results in high throughput, and also it kind of detects certain patterns, and presents those patterns to doctors, and then the doctors can spend their time in doing the diagnosis and using their judgment in a better manner, right, rather than doing a lot of the mechanical aspects of sort of ensuring the MRI happens, and etc. etc. So AI speeds it up so that the doctors 100% time could be used in using sophisticated medical judgment. So that is one example where the software is structured in such a way that AI's best powers are used and the humans best powers are used simultaneously, reaching to collaboration. The second aspect is that we need to drive adoption by learning from super users. Now, the challenge is this, that AI softwares are somewhat new. Therefore, there might be adoption challenges that you implement a software in an organization and the might not adapt to it very readily, right? This is a problem which can happen for any software implementation, but given AI software is a new paradigm, this can happen even more. So what is important to do, that what naturally emerges is that when something new is done, some super users emerge, right, who somehow intuitively seem to be figuring out how to use the software to its best powers, right? And it is important to learn from them and drive adoption among others by learning from them. So I'll give you two examples. There is a software called Dreamcatcher by this company called Autodesk, and it is for the help of designers. So what it does is that the designers can give it some constraints or some conditions which it should ensure, and then this software can generate multiple design candidates which all are meeting the criteria which have been specified by the designer, right? So the power of AI is being used in generating quickly multiple versions, and um, and uh, and the designer has to use their imagination and their creative sense and aesthetic sense, etc., etc. So what has been seen, that in this there are some designers who intuitively understand how its power can be leveraged, right? So they start using it to generate multiple candidates, and then they give inputs to the software which are in the nature of aesthetic judgment, right? So this pattern, once it has been identified that there are some super users who kind of intuitively discover this pattern and are putting this to good use, this pattern can be transferred to other users who are probably at first struggling to understand how to use this very powerful technology which they have, and that's there. There is one other example from again medical solution. So Google developed a solution which could use artificial intelligence, computer vision to scan images of eye scans, and from there to detect a condition called diabetic retinopathy. And this was a solution which was rolled out in Thailand as a pilot, and because Thailand has a massive need for scanning for these images, and there are not enough doctors, and so therefore this solution could help to expand the reach of the scanning. Now, what happened is that it was not a great success initially, right? There are a lot of challenges, and we'll come back and refer to this example while we explore other themes. But what was seen is that there was one nurse who became a super user, right? Who was able to use it to scan a lot of images and really ensured that the power of software was leveraged, that a lot of patients got scanned, right? So there will always be this kind of super users who will naturally understand how to use, and it is important that we sort of learn from them, and we use it to empower other users. Third is that the training is required for humans to for using these solutions, right? One has to realize that using AI software is actually a slightly different skill set from what people have been used to, right? When people are skilled in using different business software. Some of you are Excel ninjas. You know all the tips and tricks using Excel. When you go work for an organization, like let's say you become a digital marketer, and therefore you will know like all the advanced use cases of the digital marketing software, etc. So that's one skill set. Similarly, using softwares which have AI driven recommendations being given, it's a different skill set, and one needs specific training for that. That's there. And what we have seen in our experience in the retail domain, that the way it is different is that typically retailers, like different planners and all these functions, they are used to putting numbers and their own predictions while creating a plan and things like that, right? Now with the AI software, what will happen, that that number which they were used to, and that they were used to that flow, that number will be suggested and given by the AI, right? And so what they have to do, they have to spend their time in exercising their judgment, in making sure that the number makes sense, that it connects with the other set of numbers and all those. So this sort of a frame of mind change is there, and this is something that we have seen that it needs specific training and specific sensitization. So that's one important aspect. The fourth aspect is that the role for humans as sustainers, as stewards of AI. So this is where humans play a role in three important aspects. One is safety, number two is ethics, and number three is security. Um, when we talk about safety, the kind of cases which one thinks about are, let's say, industrial robots, or let's say self-driving cars, right? So humans need to ensure that the algorithm is not working in such a way that it ends up harming humans on the shop floor, or on the road if it's a self-driving car. So there is like this aspect of engineering where you ensure the safety of the AI. If we talk about ethics, let's think about credit approval software. So these are softwares where they can process the data about, let's say, an applicant who has applied for a loan, and by crunching different data points, they can give a decision as to whether the loan has to be approved or not. Now, this software or these algorithms learn by studying past decisions like this which have been made by humans, right? And it can so happen that those human decisions embody some bias, right? There could be racial bias, there could be gender bias, that there are certain groups of people who are, everything being equal, they are not being given loans because there is like some bias, right? So AI can sometimes learn that bias and can propagate that bias, right? So human sustainers need to recognize that, and there are engineering solutions to solve that. The good thing about AI is that this kind of biases, if they are in human systems, it is very difficult to sort of target and solve them, because I mean it is ingrained in AI. It is sometimes possible to reduce those biases into mathematical formulations and work on those mathematical formulations to change them, right? So that is the role of ethics sustainers in the use of enterprise AI. The third aspect is data security. Of course, a lot of enterprise AI software deals with very sensitive data. So think about a smart learning solution. It has data about students, their progress, their learning difficulties, and things like that. Think about a smart human resource management solution software. It has salary and all of that data. or of course in the medical field, like there's very sensitive medical data which is there. So ensuring the security of the data is very important. Again, it's an engineering aspect, but a product, uh, I mean, a product buyer or a product user or a product manager should be concerned about them. There are lots of security related regulations that need to be complied with, like GDPR, like HIPAA, and all of that. So those are important aspects as well. Coming to the second theme of how AI products can be highly accurate and explainable. So this is something that is, again, as I said, this is specific to AI. The problem of accuracy, problem of explainability, it is something um, that is very core to making AI real for businesses to use them. uh, and accuracy is of course a very important aspect, right? If AI softwares are giving decisions and predictions, we definitely want them to be accurate decisions and accurate predictions, right? And it is often the case that when an organization is trying to decide between two software, it boils down to accuracy, right? Which is the one which is more accurate? We'll take that and we'll implement that, right? So accuracy is definitely very important. Now, couple of things in which this entire accuracy need to be managed is that one is that the software should communicate its accuracy well. There should not be any root surprises, right? If the a certain prediction has a certain expected accuracy, it should not mislead the user into believing that it is 100% accurate, something like that, right? Many users who do not know or are not aware of really how the AI technology works might expect that, okay, this is a machine, this is artificial intelligence, it should be 100% accurate. That will never be the case, right? At least the state of technology that we are in, it is not the case. Therefore, what is necessary is that the accuracy levels or the accuracy expectations should be communicated well. One example is from a company called Anthem. It is a company which is like kind of insurance, and if somebody has signed up with it and then they are going for a medical treatment, they can put up application to Anthem saying that I want to go for such and such treatment, and the medical service provider organization or the hospital, they will provide some details about what is the proposed treatment, and Anthem needs to ensure that it is approving treatment plans which are in line with its policies, right? Because uh, and this is US and all, this is extremely complicated. There could be like the hospital might be proposing a much more complex treatment which is not approved, etc., etc., and then you are not supposed to pay for it, etc. So what used to happen earlier is that these decisions used to be made by humans. They would go through the treatment plans and then try to match it to the policies and all of that. Now it is done by AI, right? However, you can understand that this is a very complex situation. So the AI is not 100% accurate in all cases, and you do not want the AI to go ahead and propagate its wrong results, right? This is because this is a very important field where people are talking about treatments, and then if they are entitled to it, you don't want to refuse them, right? So what the software does is that it communicates its decision with a confidence score. And then humans can probably spend less time in looking at cases where it is more confident and take more time in looking at cases where it is less confident. And this also creates a feedback loop, which we'll talk about. So that's a good part of it, that there is a clear communication about the accuracy. Second thing is that in the entire solution, the humans can share the burden of accuracy, right? And this is one example which we have from one of our own softwares which we have built, where we are actually processing some images and we are recognizing objects out of those images, right? And this data then flows into a downstream system where it is used and all of that, right? And of course, you want this to be 100% accurate because then the downstream system will use this data. But the problem is that in the real world, sometimes the images which you are taking, they are partially blocked because of some reason. That's the setting that in which the business occurs. So what we are trying to do is that we are trying to recognize the cases where it is partially blocked and pass on those cases to a human who is handling the software, right? And that can be like maybe 2% or 3% of cases, but in those cases the human will provide the answer. Now what is happening is that in 95 to 97% cases the AI is providing a quick answer. In 2 to 3% cases the humans are providing the answer. Together the entire data is accurate and it is going to the downstream process, right? And that what matters is that the downstream process gets the right data, right? So it need not be that always AI needs to provide 100% accurate answers. Wherever it is possible, fine. In other cases, pass it on to a human, let the human and AI collaborate and the add to the accuracy. The third aspect is there should be a design for capturing feedback and continuously increasing accuracy. So the continuously increasing accuracy is a sort of a technical engineering part. It's called retraining the model or refitting the model, etc. But there are, like, from a product angle, there are certain things which need to be thought about, right? Is there a mechanism for capturing feedback and doing this, right? So to take an example, right? So I was talking to you about this steel plate scanning solutions, and there the humans finally make the judgment. Now, this judgment is to be considered the right sort of judgment, and then this can be further passed on to the algorithm, and then algorithm over time learns to mimic this judgment closely. Over time, it gives less and less of this false signals, right? And it identifies the cases correctly, and it goes closer to the human judgment that's there. And then there are certain cases in which you can take the feedback from a human input, but from the real data, right? And this is mostly true in the case of forecasting, right? So let's say in retail, there's a lot of forecasting of sales that we do, that we forecast that in this period there will be certain sales, and based on that somebody can plan inventory and all of that. Now when that period actually happens, then we can see what is the actual sales data, and we can feed it back to the algorithm and make sure that the algorithm is continuously learning the new patterns which are emerging. So this mechanism needs to be there as a part of the enterprise AI software. Then there is another aspect, is that one should look out for changes in underlying data. So again, going back to the example of Google's artificial vision diabetic retinopathy scan solution, which was rolled out in Thailand, what happened is that Google had built this software using ideal images in the lab, right? And when it was used in the field, what it was seen that in some cases the images are not ideal. They are taken in low light and things like that, and the software kind of are not able to process it, right? So the AI algorithm is always going to be able to mostly be successful in cases where the data on which it is predicting is similar to the data on which it has been built, right? But if it so happens that in the real world, in the real software application, it is likely to change, then there has to be a mechanism to be anticipated, right? And one way in which one can look at is something called like looking at the distribution of the data. So to take an example from the retail world, of course, during this COVID times, the pattern of sales in the retail world between e-commerce and brick and mortar has changed, right? The same retailers are now selling more through their e-commerce channel than their brick and mortar channels, right? Now, the models which are doing the forecasting, they need to be capturing that, okay, the underlying data's pattern seems to have changed, right? The distribution seems to have changed, right? And again, be able to assimilate that, be able to refit that. So this mechanism also needs to be there. Also, there could be one other thing, is that there could be change in the just a computation infrastructure from what you have built, or there could be like a bottleneck regarding that, and one needs to be aware and plan for that. So again, in our example, we found a situation where we needed to run a software in mobile devices without assuming that those mobile devices will be able to connect over internet to a large server and be able to sort of use the AI algorithm. So you need to run the AI algorithm in the mobile devices, and it was possible to sort of build a smaller, lighter model which will run. Like there are some compromises, but yes, infra challenges could be there, could be real, and that needs to be talked about. Again, in the Google example, what was seen is that sometimes in probably interior areas of Thailand, there were the internet connectivity was not great, and those images could not be uploaded to the system, and that created delay in the system. So that challenge is needs to be anticipated and needs to be planned for. The second aspect is explainability. This is our area of active research and area in which a lot of people are thinking through in the AI field about explainability of AI, right? Because humans do not react very well to black boxes that, okay, the system is telling me something, but why is it telling me, right? The explanation is something that is important. And the problem is that the nature of some of the latest and greatest and the most powerful algorithms is that they are by nature are somewhat black box, right? They discovered very abstract mathematical patterns in the data, which often does not translate well to like a simple intuitive understanding, right? And that there is a value in that because that can make it predict better, but there is a challenge because there needs to be some explainability. So yes, one has to sort of navigate around it and handle it. But again, if you are a product manager or a buyer, you probably want to make sure that there is some degree of explainability in the solution. I'll show you one example. So this is from Salesforce. Salesforce, some of you might know, is a very well-known and probably the most well-known CRM or customer relationship management solution, which a lot of companies used for keeping tab on their customers. And like let's say a telecom company can use it to sort of look at their customer portfolio. And Salesforce has a inbuilt AI in its solution called Einstein, and this is one example from that solution where you can see that the AI is saying that the customer is happy, that sentiment is happy, right? And in this right side of the screen, you can see that there are some factors which are trying to explain why the AI is saying that the customer is being happy. So the tenure is 7 years, right? Which means that okay, the customer has been with us for some time, so therefore probably they are happy. Otherwise, why would they have stayed? Things like that, right? And here, let's say the AI could maybe even explain it better, right? It can say that okay, from the past data, it has been seen that those who have been there for 7 years, 95% of them continue for 10 years, right, or more, right? And that gives a very intuitive explanation as to why we are seeing that this customer is happy, right? And of course, there you have to strike an economy of how much data you will show. Maybe the second level of data you show by clicking and you double click and etc etc. But the main thing is that this is doing a very good attempt at being able to explain the AI and the AI recommendation and the AI decision. So this is one example of explainability. Coming to the third aspect of design, and this is true for any software, but there are some special considerations in AI software that design is something that matters a lot. Um, First is that we should make sure to blend with the business workflow and make that flow better and faster. So, given AI is this powerful news technology, one can sort of be just focus on building great AI, right? And then forget the fact that AI needs to fit perfectly in the business workflow, right? Uh, and only then will it be successful. So again, going back to the Google's example, so that of course Google must have built the state of the art AI solution there, but again, it was a mixed success. It was only a mixed success, right? And why was that? What they discovered, and they are actually going back to the field and working with the people to understand the workflow and the business workflow in that situation. Uh, it was only a mixed success because it was not blended to the business workflow initially. So, for example, it did not allow the nurses to send the images to the doctors, right? That's an essential function, right? It did not prompt them for taking a better image, so the nurse is stuck, right? So it did not anticipate that that thing can happen in the flow, right? Those kind of thing. The patients had to wait, and then they were not cool. So there has to be a lot of thinking and mapping of the business workflow, and making sure that the AI fits in there. And this is where, as business graduates, if some of you go into product management, or even if you are users, this is where you probably need to put your thinking that, okay, is this going to fit into the business flow, right? Because the technologists are of course going to build the technology, but then ensuring that it goes in lockstep with the business is probably something that you are going to do. In our own examples, we had built a software where we were able to help the clients do something which they used to do one by one for thousands of their items. It's a retailer, and it enabled them to do all of it at once. They could like upload thousands of items, and it could process all of that once, a specific decision making process. But what we needed to make sure is that the input to the process and the output to the process remained exactly same as what they were doing earlier, because there are a lot of dependencies, right? And once we made that sure, then it worked very well. Most of the people adapted it. They're very happy using it and all of that. So the business workflow is something that is very important. Second thing is that give humans choices, and this is something we have talked about, that typically the software should give humans choice to override, edit, update the recommendations, and that is for the AI to learn better, and for human and AI to collaborate and go to 100% accuracy. But here I want to sort of quote a very interesting study which happened, which shows that humans love autonomy, and if a software tries to take away autonomy, they would not naturally take to it. So you should give autonomy, and you should give choices, so that they're naturally disposed towards using it. So this was a study which was done in France, where people were trying to see that, is there a way of framing a request for donation to a charitable enterprise, or to make people give more, right? And what they found is that just using a verbal cue of, after making the request, saying that, but it is your option whether to donate or not, that actually induce people to give more, right? So people love autonomy. They use just a simple verbal cue to just give that autonomy, or make that autonomy very salient to them, and then people felt good and gave more, right? So this is just fundamental human psychology, and it is true for human interaction with software as well. It's not only about human to human interaction, and therefore choices are very important, especially with AI, because there is a lot of this talk about AI is going to replace humans, etc., etc., and therefore people might feel somewhat threatened, but giving that autonomy puts them at ease. The third aspect is basically learning using some amount of psychological hacks in software, and B2C software has used it quite a lot, right? Your uh, Instagrams and Pinterest and all of this, these are very addictive software. Like, they keep the people hooked, like the users hooked, right? And there's a lot of psychological tricks that they use. There's a book called Hooked, which actually explores this fairly well, which talks about that how this B2C software, they give users something called variable reward, right? And that keeps them coming back for more. So this is typically used in B2C, but then there is a possibility of using them in B2B and enterprise products also. because the thing is that B2C software, they want to keep their users spend more time on them, and in B2B it is just the opposite. The B2B software wants the users to do their job quickly, fast, and that is what will give satisfaction to the user, right? But then that joy of getting done with your work, the joy of doing your work well, that's the reward that B2B software can give. And it could be as simple as that somebody has gone through some very complicated flow and has completed it, and just showing a screen saying job well done, you are done, you are completed, you are done for the day, things like that. Those are good rewards, right? So this just makes people good about using the software and sort of makes them adapt to it. um, Nudge is actually a well-known principle. It's a like a thought, an idea developed by a very prominent economist called Richard Thaler, which is essentially using some insights into human psychology called biases, which are some hardwired patterns of human psychology due to which can be used to cue them to do a desirable act, right? And how can this be used in software? That because in software also there could be flows and paths which you want the user to take, because those are better paths, because those are paths which explore the power of AI in that software, and you could use nudges to do that, right? So one example is that let's say in an email software, people might draft an angry email, and it is possible to develop AI which can detect that angry tone. And maybe you create a feature in an email software where it just gives a nudge that do you really want to send it, right? And it has been seen that this just the human psychology is such that just as this simple nudge might make people rethink, and they might not send, right? So that could be one example. And then there are a lot of such examples of how softwares employ nudges, and very well studied. And in B2C software, there's a very interesting cases. Typically, B2B is very business like, and it does not uh, use a lot of them, but they can definitely be used to improve the usability and uh, make them better for the users. The fourth thing is that we need to imbue the product with some humanness. This again refers to a psychological principle called anthropomorphism, which is that humans by nature, the psychology is wired such that we attribute humanness to inanimate objects, right? And a very clear example of that, let's say you are using a software and it's not doing something because there is some problem. You almost feel like that software is uncooperative. It's like a person, right? When you express your first frustration, you will see sometimes the language you use would almost be like, it's like, okay, this is not doing it, what is the problem with this, etc. It's almost like you are talking about a human being, right? And that's hardware aspect of it, right? It is something that is natural, and it cannot be avoided. So good thing that the software recognizes this and imbues it with some humanness in cases. Two specific cases for AI driven software. One is that and this could be true for any software, is that there could be instructions for usage or FAQs which need to use a certain direct language. It needs to say uh, your software and your like it needs to address the user directly, so that has seen to work well. The second thing is that there are these artificial intelligence chatbots and wizards which are embedded in some of this software, right? And it is good to think about a personality, appropriate personality for these wizards and chatbots that just imbues a little more humanness to it. So to take an example, let's say Siri, right? Siri is that the of course the assistant, artificial intelligence assistant, which you on Apple devices, and it has a kind of a somewhat of a sassy personality, right? Which is probably a reflection of the brand image of Apple, right? On the other hand, Microsoft also has a chatbot, or rather artificial intelligence assistant called Cortana, and its tone and manner is different. It's a little more business-like and sort of a, slightly different tone, helpful, etc., which is probably the brand image which Microsoft wants to project, right? So similarly, if your AI product is going to have a chatbot, that is probably useful to think about as a personality for it. So when we think about building a chatbot for planners, right? Planners who deal with a lot of data, um, uh, finance people and all of them, then we probably want to make that chatbot personality like very meticulous sounding, very serious sounding, etc., etc. And there needs to be needs to be conscious thought going into how you write a script and how you shape the language of those chatbots, right? On the other hand, if you are building a chatbot which is going to help, let's say, shoppers choose different apparel items, then you want that chatbot to probably have a very kind of project a bubbly personality, very helpful. You'll probably have a like a chatbot icon which will be colorful and all of that, right? So that these aspects need to be thought about. So that brings me to the end of it. Uh, Business students typically like neat frameworks, and I have tried to recap what we talked about in a framework where there are three themes of enabling humans to succeed and shine, explain well and carefully manage accuracy, and design for adoption and success. And under these three themes, we have talked about 10 principles which we believe can help artificial intelligence enterprise softwares to succeed. Uh, so that's it. Thanks a lot. Very glad to talk about something which I do day in and day out. And again, enterprise software is probably not something about which there's a lot of discussion and all in media or there, but it's incredibly powerful, and it's something that I believe is a great opportunity for India going forward. So I hope some of this comes useful to some of you at different points of time.
No, sir. Sir, we'll start with the question answers. Uh,
Sure.
mm, yeah, there will be questions posted in the chat. So, do you want me to read those out to you, or you'll take the questions from the chat itself?
I can take them from the chat window itself.
Oh, sir.
Okay. So the first one is thanks a lot for the session. People's behavior would have changed a lot because of the pandemic. As a result, the historic data present for building models would be less accurate. In this case, what should be our approach while building AI ML products? Yeah, so this is one problem which we are facing. See, so there is a technical solution to it, right? And the technical solution is that you have to refit the data in certain ways. You have to train the model more often. There are different technical solutions to it, which I'll not go into. But what is important from a product management angle is that there should be a structure for doing this, right? And this is unprecedented times. There are ways of handling this. Like, it might be that in this time the data is so different that automatic retraining of the models might not work, so one might have to do some manual adjustments and push the data to the products, but the product should be flexible to do it, right? So yes, that's the approach which could be there. But the again the core principle for building AI ML products remains same. It is even more important to be explainable. It is even more important to set expectations around accuracy, right? It is even more important to be able to continuously improve accuracy. So yeah, that's what and all of us who are in the space of AI ML products, we are kind of problem solving around this day in day out, right? There are technical solutions to it, but the product should support those solutions. The next one is forecasting accuracy has declined in COVID-19 environment, leading to panic situations sometimes. How can models accuracy be improved in such as situations to optimize the inventory and marketing spends by firms, right? So yeah, I mean, this is true. The accuracy has declined. Uh, so realistically, what we are seeing in the market is that there will be a brief period where literally nothing can be done, right? Because it's like, let's say there was a lockdown and then things have opened up, right? What will happen in that week is very difficult to say, right? Because it is human behavior and one has to see that, right? So that's true. Now, but from there, then there are certain ways in which one can go about it, right? One, so for example, let's say the lockdown, the unlock is not happening all at once, right? The unlock is happening in a phased manner. So let's say first a few markets open up or a few stores open up. Therefore, you can now study that data which happened in those stores for a limited period. And now when some more stores open up, you now have to map those more stores into like stores from the first set and make the prediction, right? That will be your best bet, right? That's one thing. Second is that even while the lockdown was happening, you might be able to see certain patterns from, let's say, e-commerce data, right? From the e-commerce data also, you might see there are areas in which people are from where people are ordering more. So you can get some patterns about localized demands from those areas, right? Then let's say unlock happens and you are now trying to do sales forecasting. While you might not be able to know as to how much people will come out and shop, because that's like very difficult to predict. But one thing which you might be assured that areas which had more incidence of COVID, probably people are going to be more circumspect there and less circumspect in other areas, right? So at least there will be a relative uh, sort of degree which you can anticipate, right? So now, as you start putting together some of this available data, you can start getting to some better answers, right? What we have seen that what we needed to do is that as unlock and all that happened, we needed to use some of these different data sources to, for the first weeks, take like a very educated, semi data driven, semi judgment driven forecast. And then as soon as it happened, then one could study the data as it was happening, right? And just go through rapid iterations and establish the pattern, right? Just make sure that the pattern which is establishing is reflected in your forecast. What we have seen that after a couple of weeks, the patterns have kind of stabilized, right? It might be that people are increasingly coming out, but there is a pattern, right? It's like every week it is 5% higher and some certain things like that. So those are inputs which you can use for optimizing the inventory and marketing spends. The third one is COVID-19 pandemic is having a significant impact on CPG and retail. This has resulted in changing consumer behavior across categories, brands, channels, retailers. It would be nice if you could share with us some insights on how human collaboration with AI ML driven solution are helping in determining how to best handle promotions, out of stocks, pricing, and assortment to meet the changing needs of consumers. So this is indeed a great example of where AI ML plus human collaboration can be used, right? So what AI is doing is that it is bringing together all these disparate sources of data which I was talking about, right? There are some signals from e-com data, there are some signals from COVID, there are in US, there are some there's like you get mobility data, that is what is how many people are coming out in a certain area and all of that. You get data about uh, about uh, uh, about some jobs, etc., etc. So what AI does is that it processes all of this data and presents this in an insightful form to the humans, and the humans can then sort of use some of their own judgment, and in these cases they might sort of need to gather some sort of qualitative inputs that they're hearing from the markets, and together they can create a good forecast. And similarly, like let's say for promotions, it could be that there are categories which people are not buying, so you probably need to go deep on those. And then there are categories where people are more interested in those categories, and there you not. So this aspect of taking a judgment call is where humans are good at. And what AI would do is that it will be able to present this data to the humans for taking the decisions. The next one is AI platforms are helpful tools to productize ML models by providing tools for managing the end-to-end machine learning lifestyle cycle. But with data coming from different sources and form audio-visual, how do you integrate this data to provide a holistic picture of a customer client and make informed decisions based on the overall data? So again, I mean, this is a little bit of a technical problem, but yes, you can take data from different sources and put them in the same model. What is called is that uh, like the data from different sources and different types can be constructed as what you call variables or input factors into a model, and then it can take that, right? There are different ways. Like let's say if it is audio and visual data about a customer, right? So from the audio, maybe first you want to extract some specific information, and then you take the specific information and put that into a model. So we were showing example from a customer sentiment model, right? So there in the model, there are some factors which are purely quantitative factors, like how many years the customer has been with us, whether in recent times the engagement has increased, that they have spent more money with us, etc., etc. With that, now if you want to use the data from their customer service calls, right? So what then you might be able to do is that you first process the customer service calls through a speech to text uh, solution, which converts them into text. And then on this text solution, you use, let's say, a sentiment analysis model, right? Which actually extract a sentiment from that. And then you use that sentiment in your final model, which gives you an overall score for what is the risk of that customer for staying with us, right? So that could be one example where you synthesize different sources of data. But with different sources of data, these are specific technical solutions that one can make. The next question is from Apple's assistant Siri to self-driving cars, evolution of AI has been transformational to the extent that it seems to replicate human characteristics, intellect, and behavior. Can you elaborate on the risks and hazards associated with fully developed and self-aware AI machines? So yes, I mean, fully developed and self-aware AI machines could use in could sort of act in ways which are harmful. There are a lot of debates on this, but I do not think at this point we actually have any self-aware AI, and this is probably some time away, and research going on. Um, so yes, if there is self-aware AI, that AI could try to theoretically serve its own goal and therefore harm humans. But that's not probably something that we need to be worried about right now. Right now, what is very tangible example of uh, some risks and hazards associated with AI is what I was talking about, that there could be biases which can get into AI, right? And uh, I'll give one example that there was a there's some kind of a AI model called a language model, which essentially processes text, lots of text data, and then it creates an abstract mathematical representation of our language, right? And it was seen that that language model had learned gender bias. It because simply that gender bias existed in the input data. It for a doctor, it would not find an equivalent as a lady doctor, but it will say it's a medical superintendent or a nurse. That it's certainly an example of gender bias, and this kind of things can happen in those credit rating credit approval solutions where a loan is not being given to people based on their gender or based on their race and etc etc. So these things can come in there. Again, the good thing is that these things can be solved, right? So in that example of the language model with the gender bias, there were researchers who were able to identify that bias as a mathematical construct, and once you identify that as a mathematical construct, you can override it, right? So that was possible. So that is like a real risk that which we need to handle at this point, right? Then there are other risks about AI being used in ways like for surveillance and things like that. There are examples of AI being used to screen candidates for jobs and all, where again this kind of biases are creeping in, which need to be systematically handled. The next one is OTT giants like Netflix, Amazon Prime have leveraged the ML trends, but how can the media industry, especially the news industry, can leverage it? And instead of conventional fixed pricing, how can we come up with a model that optimizes spend for only the amount of service content that is being consumed? Uh, yeah, so uh, yeah, so the pricing I think is more of a pricing problem, and it is a business call. Certainly, AI can probably help in measuring it more accurately, and sort of maybe discovering preferences there, which would be there. It could AI could also potentially help do some kind of price discrimination. Like, so let's say you want to charge more from people who you believe are really hooked to your platform, right? And AI can probably really distinguish who are the people who are really hooked by studying their consumption patterns, right? So that can happen, and that might not be a great sort of use, and it could lead it's not might not be great for the consumer. It might need to get into regulatory gray area, but that might be possible. And news industry actually uses a lot of AI. Right? One simple example could be, let's say, this as a news item is being cast. There could be like a Twitter handle in which people are tweeting, right? And there could be a live sentiment analysis which is happening on the Twitters on the tweets, right? So that could be one example. There are a lot of examples where AI can actually help synthesize the news reports and all. So there are some examples. People, I think it's more experimental now, but that is happening. Uh, there are also examples of where AI can create artificial videos and all, which is called deep fake. And again, those have lots of concerning usages, but maybe they can be used in some good ways. I had also come across an example of Associated Press, which was using AI for doing reporting of financial data. So what the AI was able to do, that it was able to read the financial statements and uh, kind of assimilate some patterns and some insights quickly, right? So the humans could then focus on doing the interpretation and connecting the dots. So that is actually a very good usage of AI in media and journalism. Explaining The next question is, explaining AI solutions to clients may not always be easy. providing choices to clients to preserve autonomy is something that was discussed today. What other approaches work in such cases? Uh, so explaining AI solutions might not be easy is true. Having said that, now there's so much sort of awareness about AI that we actually find a lot of our clients do uh, intuitively understand that that's there. Definitely, choices is good. The assurance that AI solution is not only about AI and it's the purpose of it is not AI for AI's sake, but that it is going to help in the business flow and it is going to fit into the business flow. That has been found to be very useful. That assures clients. And the third thing is that what is the value, right? If you are being going to use AI, are you going to make better decisions? What is the tangible financial impact from them? Showing all of that, that typically helps clients to understand AI solutions. It goes without saying that the availability of right data is the most common problem and plays a crucial role in building the right model. A lot of time, effort, and money is spent on collecting, storing, and integrating data sources without first determining how the data will eventually be consumed and by whom. How Impact Analytics is dealing with this critical problem. Um, so, mostly in the retail domain, this is not a very salient problem that we have come across. Yes, I mean there is some like the some amount of data which is stored, which is anyway stored in the normal flow of business. It is used for business reporting, etc., etc. So one can handle that. And Yeah, and then another aspect is that yes, a lot of time, effort, and money is spent, but that's the thing about that. That is one aspect about the recent boom in AI, right? The cost of actually doing all of that has come down, right? And the ease of doing all of that come down. So in most cases, it would be good for enterprises to actually collect and preserve as much data as it is possible. It is now incredibly easy and cheap to do that, given there are a lot of this cloud solutions and all, and then you figure out the usage, right? Of course you should figure out the usage as you are collecting, but then even if you are not sure, if you believe that data could have some value at some point of time, enterprises should probably be collecting it. Uh, of course maintaining security and all of that, but excuse me. But as it's being said, data is the new oil, and it's an incredibly powerful resource. How can small scale retailers leverage AI and analytics to drive growth and efficiency? So, yes, enterprise software can be for small scale retailers also. Uh, that is the power of the current sort of software as a service solutions, because it can be scalable easily, because it typically uses cloud infrastructure which is easily scalable, which means that a small scale retailer is not looking at a long drawn out implementation and a lot of consulting and a lot of sort of uh, costly processes, but so long as they can structure their data and fit it into a AI process, it can be served. So that is possible. The next question is, due to COVID situation, physical product companies like sports product companies are hit hard, and now is the time they will have to focus on digital platforms for marketing. But how to decide which is the best means with the help of analytics, and what are KPI that they should focus on? Yeah, so this is actually a very specific problem called market mix modeling, which is in one area of and there are some softwares which handle that. So market mix modeling actually studies the impact of marketing investments in different media channels and sees how that impacts the final KPIs. The final KPIs are, of course, sales, profitability, and all of that. and then it can discover a lot of relationships, like investing in one media channel can help boost another media channel, and there could be cannibalization between media channels and etc. And by discovering all these relationships, it is able to suggest a allocation of the budget between channels, right? So that is one way. The challenge, of course, is that due to COVID, the pattern of ROI from marketing investments across channels have also changed, right? And in some cases, some media assets have become cheaper. So again, the model needs to adapt to those recent things. But again, I mean, it can learn from the data, and it can optimize. There is also another field called attribution modeling, where let's say a customer has come to shop on a retailer's website, and before that the customer saw an ad on Facebook, and then the customer got a email notification, and then the customer got a SMS notification, etc. So there is a way of modeling how much each of those interventions mattered in the customer finally coming to the site, right? So that's called something called multi-touch attribution. Again, there are softwares for that. So these kind of softwares can help in doing this. Doing this. The next question is, as each day passes, it is becoming more evident that analytics will be the route to prosper for any organization in the coming days. I have also worked on modeling data models for customer segmentation and champion challenger models during my internship for a fintech company. But I was not able to see the project to implementation due to time constraint. What do you think are the struggles one would face during the implementation of data models into live data, and how do we handle the same? So yes, I mean the challenge is essentially complexity, right? So all these things which you talked about, it has to flow into the business flow, right? And developing AI models is can be challenging, right? Because you need to go through iterations, and then you discover patterns in the data and all of that. But even after that, you might find that there isn't a mechanism for the user to consume that, right? Um, let's say a data scientist have developed a model, and then how will the users use it? The typical business user will not be able to run, let's say, a Python code on their terminal and get the model, right? So what is important is that when one is doing a data science project, one kind of thinks through all of this, that how will it will be it will be consumed. And there are a lot of ways of actually doing this interface and consumption interfaces, right? Even without building a full-fledged uh, UI software, there are some sort of uh, off-the-shelf technology which can build like a simple web app, right? With a little bit of Python or R code, and one can plan to use those, right? So those are good ways of getting your AI model to production in a very simple MVP, minimum viable product kind of way, and that could be one some can explore. But otherwise, yes, there is substantial effort that goes into doing it end to end, from developing the model to going to the consumption. The next question is, sir, how is AI and advanced analytics used in pricing strategy? What metrics are used while setting up price for a product service? The matrix which will be used for setting up price depends. Typically, one would look to maximize margin, but then it might also be a new product which has been introduced in the market, and one does want to induce sales. Therefore, one might be looking at number of items bought. In certain cases, one will also have targets on top line, and therefore one can look at the sales metric. There might be cases where you are stuck with inventory and you want to get rid of the inventory. Therefore, again, you just are looking at number of units sold. That's there. and AI and advanced analytics is used in pricing strategy. So essentially what it does is that it builds a elasticity model, right? Elasticity is something that you probably have studied in economics. It's the how sales moves with the pricing. The thing is that here the elasticity is not only with regards to that item's own price, it is also regards to let's say the price of other items, so that the supplements and the complements effect can come in. It could take into account the pricing of competitors. It could take into account, excuse me, it could take into account um, the marketing that is happening. It could take into account seasonality that is happening. It can actually develop, excuse me, pricing not at an overall level, but could be for specific customers or customer segments. So yes, so that's how AI is used for pricing strategy. The next question is, due to COVID-19 impacts, many domains, core sectors, various service sectors, travel sector, transport sector are going through worse phases of its life cycle. What plans they should take to sustain this phase? Excuse me. Or how should they adjust to the new normal? So yeah, I mean, it is definitely a difficult business situation that they are going through, and there is a role of different business strategy also to tied through this. The way AI can all be used is that um, here you will still, to come out of it, you will still need to do some investment, right? You will probably need to do some marketing. You will need to reach out to clients. You will need to give offers, right? But given that you have already had a tough business period and you have not generated a lot of profits during that period, you want to be extremely efficient with that spending and investment, right? And that is where AI can help, right? So AI can help you be very precise in measuring the ROI of your investments, and help you to sort of distribute and allocate your budget between different channels in the better manner. So that is how they can probably this thing. In fact, there is, I mean, because this has happened and the businesses are going through a tough times, many businesses are increasingly adopting digital and AI based solutions. So that's something that a lot of businesses are doing. The next question is, what are your views on the non-personal data regulation framework that came out a few days ago, and what do you think are some of the challenges with using non-personal data? Uh, I have not sort of studied that framework in detail, but generally there are some of the. So of course, the more challenges will be there with personal data. But see, with non-personal data also, there could be broad patterns which can be identified, right? And by non-personal, if we are talking about aggregated data, etc., etc., let's say you are not able to identify patterns at a person level, right? But you might be able to identify patterns at an area level, right? And then you might be able to target that area in a certain manner. You might be doing different offers for that area, geographic area, and things like that. And those could be concerns with that, right? So, yes, I mean, at the end of the day, their businesses have to function with regulation, right? AI is a tool. You can use that tool to do different things, and it is up to business regulators to ensure that it is being used in a way that is useful for the general populace. It is useful for the consumers, and all of that. The next question is, how will AI/ML technologies help predict post-pandemic market behavior so that we are better prepared in future for such unforeseen circumstances being enforced due to sudden lockdowns? Uh, so I mean, at this point, the post-pandemic market it's like, because we are unlocking and now there is a talk of a vaccine and all. Probably it's going to be like a slow sort of a recovery, and AI can kind of study the trajectory of that recovery, right? Of course, what one has to understand that there will be certain factors which might create a bump in that trajectory, right? So let's say a vaccine, that Oxford vaccine which everyone is talking about, right? That vaccine is suddenly announced, right? Then of course there might be a step jump in the way the recovery is happening, right? uh, and uh, Similarly, like something else happens, let's say we might be seeing that the COVID viruses, that its virulence is going down. That might also happen. That will see a spike, right? So that's there. um, what maybe so AI/ML can help in multiple ways. One is that it can study the data, it can map the trajectory, it can forecast the trajectory to some extent. Also, it can probably process a lot of data, that is like a lot of media data, a lot of Twitter, etc. data, to kind of summarize some sentiments, right? And that could be could be an useful input, right? Because things are going to be driven by sentiments, and that is where AIML might be able to help. What do you think can be some of the positive impacts of the COVID situation? Uh, it's probably, I mean, this is definitely not something that we would have wanted to go through. Uh, but see, I mean, it happens. Like in history, also pandemics and all that has happened. I think what happens out of it is that people and businesses learn to adapt. They will learn to adapt some better frugal techniques, frugal ways of doing business. As I mentioned, that some businesses are moving towards more digitization, etc. So that is probably, uh, I mean, I mean, some of that would have happened. Maybe some of that has been sped up by the situation. Having said that, it would always have been better if it did not happen.
Uh, Hello, sir.
Yeah. Hi.
We are done with the questions. Yeah. Thank you, sir, for such an enlightening session. Your insights on human AI collaboration to enable complex decision making processes, bring down the cost of predictions, and eventually empower humans versus the myth of replacing them were really thought provoking. Your views on B2B AI software apps, the need to have AI ML models to generate relevant recommendations, and the 10 principles on the whole would go a long way with the future managers. It was a great opportunity to learn from your experiences, and we are extremely grateful to you for sparing your invaluable time to interact with us. We look forward to similar engagements in the future, and we hope that this will be a start of a lasting relationship with you and your organization. Thank you once again, sir, for such an engaging session.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for the organizers for inviting and very ably conducting this. It was a great pleasure for me to interact with you all. There are many very thoughtful questions, and glad to have interacted with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.